A new Assassin's Creed game is on the way, set to release later this year and to be announced at E3 in just over a week. Now, we're all very excited, especially me, and so I figured I would put together this video, which is a list of 10 things that Ubisoft has to address if they want Assassin's Creed codename Empire to be successful. Now, I should clarify that this list is primarily composed of frustrations that have been aired by the community as a whole. This isn't specifically my list of things that I would like to see in the next game. This is not a wish list. This is a list of things that have to be addressed in order for the game to be taken seriously, not just by its fans, but also by the gaming industry as a whole. Now, the two predecessors to this upcoming game were Assassin's Creed Syndicate and Assassin's Creed Unity. I've played both of these two games actually multiple times in the last couple weeks for different videos that I've done, links in the description. But having done that, I can say safely that many of these issues that I'm going to point out are still present in those games, even after 2 to 3 years of updates and polishing by Ubisoft. These are issues that have plagued the series for years at this point, and I hope that this upcoming game can address them. Now, the first thing that needs attention is, of course, the combat system. Now, this shouldn't come as any surprise. Pretty much everybody agrees that combat, especially brawling combat, is one of the franchise's weaknesses. Now, to be fair, they tried to address this in Assassin's Creed Syndicate by giving you Jacob and Evie Frye to play as. Evie being more of the stereotypical assassin, very light on her feet, running around, she's got a different moveset, and Jacob being the brawler, the guy that isn't afraid to just go in, whole hog, guns blazing, and punching everything that moves. Now, that was an interesting sort of addition, but they didn't communicate it very well or follow it through to its full conclusion. It would have been awesome to have Jacob built out as a completely melee character, somebody who wasn't very fast at climbing or scaling walls. Perhaps he couldn't use the rope caster, something like that. That could have worked if they had committed to it, made Jacob the brawler and Evie the stereotypical sneak around assassin, but they didn't do that. They tried to make it work for both of them, which kind of defeats the purpose of having that distinction in the first place. There's, of course, a couple of solutions to this. If you have multiple protagonists, which some leaks and rumors have suggested that the next Assassin's Creed will have dual protagonists again, others have said for years now that it will be a single character playing through, so it's not really clear at this point. But if you were to have two protagonists, then you could have it split up, as I previously stated, where one of the protagonists is much more focused on stealth, the other is more on combat, and they could have different movesets, different techniques, different equipment, different powers and skills and skill trees and all of that. It would take a lot of work, but they've taken a year off, so I think that it's reasonable to expect that they could have achieved something like this. The other solution is that if there is a single character that is playable, that you have a very broad branching skill tree to choose from, not expecting the player to level up every character to the fullest extent, therefore making every character the exact same, at which point you have to ask, why are you even giving the player a skill tree if it doesn't actually have any impact, and if everybody's characters ends up the same anyways? This is very, very simple to do. You simply start out at the very top of the skill tree with one option, then you branch out. You have one column that is combat oriented and another that is stealth oriented, and you can commit to one or to the other, and perhaps later on in the game you can switch or learn new skills or something, sacrifice other equipment. You can do that way. But this is a much more RPG based system, and it's something that Ubisoft has expressed interest in implementing into their character and skill systems. Now, that is, of course, just very broadly speaking on combat. The more specific issues with combat are, for instance, the AI. Look at this footage right here, for instance. I shoot this girl with a giant pistol that is so loud everybody should be able to hear it, especially because I'm standing in broad daylight on the roof. But the guys at the bottom don't even realize what's happening. They don't even look up. They don't even move because I'm apparently invisible. And so I actually pick her up and throw her off the roof in front of a dude, but he just notices her when she lands on the ground and doesn't even think to look up because his AI is so stupid it can't recognize that the body just fell from the roof above him. Another instance would be this case where I was choking out a police officer and then 2 police officers rode by on a carriage and didn't see me choking the life out of one of their coworkers. And probably my biggest peeve with this combat system is the dedicated counter button. This is one of the issues that I've seen in all of these games that try to employ this free flow, quote unquote, combat system. And the dedicated counter button is something that is present in every game that employs this free flow system. If you look at Shadow of Mordor, if you look at the Batman Arkham games or the Assassin's Creed games, you see that there's a dedicated counter button that when the character or an enemy enters into an attack state, you slap that button and all of a sudden all of your problems are resolved. You go back to mashing X until you see another yellow something or other pop up. You hit Y again, then you go back, keep doing it, and that's all you have to do. And it's very, very frustrating because there's no depth to it. It turns into slightly more complicated button mashing, and I frankly hate it. And following in that same vein, another something that Ubisoft has to address are the controls. Something that has plagued the games since its very first entry is that you will have an idea as to what you want your assassin to do, whether it's climbing up the wall this way or that way. You will put that information in whatever capacity into the controller that you're using or keyboard and mouse, but then the character does something completely opposite to what you intended. If you wanted to climb up the wall or gently scale down it, then your character all of a sudden leaps off the building into the water and you have to reset your mission because you weren't allowed to touch the water. Something like that. It happens way too often for a AAA title like Assassin's Creed. Another thing that I would like to see addressed, and this is one of the more personal things, is toned down ragdoll physics. I get it, you have ragdoll physics, it's cool, good for you, but look at this. This is a little absurd. I don't mean to be so churlish in my criticisms, but this always ruined any sort of immersion I had going for the game because the body's contorted in so many weird ways that I couldn't quantify what was going on. The fourth thing that I would like them to address is the Abstergo plotline. Now, the modern day plotline, if you followed the channel before, you know that I personally do not enjoy these plotlines. I find in terms of gameplay, they slow it down and make it super clunky. And in terms of the narrative, they tend to be fairly boring. Now, some people have expressed the complete opposite opinion. They find it super exciting, super interesting, and it ties everything together. If that's true of you, then great. I have no issue with that. But personally, I find it a little frustrating. Now, what I would like them to do is to either commit to it or to get rid of it. Because in Syndicate, they did this weird half-balancing act where they sort of sometimes mentioned it, then they didn't. And then all of a sudden, it was a big thing with the rifts that you could go into, kind of like in Unity with those rifts. They just need to commit to it, and if it's going to be a major plotline, make it a major plotline. If it's going to be a minor thing that is technically part of the franchise but they never explicitly mention it, so be it. I just need some sort of commitment so that it's not this weird balancing act where they don't want to commit to anything because they don't want to piss off either group of fans. Number 5 is more narrative. I would like to see the world tell the story all the more. And this is something that we see a lot in these games. They put a lot of effort into the storytelling and the environmental storytelling that goes on. All of these signs that you see all over the world that you're playing through in all of these games, somebody had to do the research. They had to find that portrait or they had to find that poster. Most of them are real, legitimate posters that existed at the time, and then they put them up in some sort of context or some location in the game so that it makes sense and isn't just randomly placed there. And this is what really shows the talented teams that are behind these games. They have some real creative talent and the ability to put these little touches on the world. Like, look at this. This is one instance I encountered just the other day while playing through Syndicate. It's a man speaking and reading a book to children, and it turns out it's about the Jabberwocky, and I'll just let it play. It put a smile on my face, and hopefully it puts a smile on yours as well.
What's happening? And as in uffish thought he stood, yes?
What's a bandersnatch?
I haven't decided yet, but I know that it's fearsome and has a taste for children.
Oh.
Where was I? And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went gull-mumphing back.
Oh, dreadful! He gave that monster what for?
And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. Oh, frabjous day, Callooh, Calais! He chortled in his joy.
Now, it's moments like that that can pull me right back into the game and make me happy, makes me want to keep playing. But so often, the game tries to force you to ignore this. They give you a rope caster to climb on top of the buildings and to just scale across the skyscape instead of actually enjoying and taking in the world around you. So much so that the way that I tend to force myself into immersion in these games is to not allow myself, except in the rarest of instances, to use the sprint button, to hold down right trigger if you're playing on a controller or shift if you're on the keyboard, just to make myself walk around in the world and experience it like I would if I were in it. The sixth thing I would like to see addressed specifically for this upcoming Assassin's Creed game is more webbed side quests. Now, what do I mean by webbed side quests? Well, I mean side quests that are all interlinked and are not just one-off quests. Go fetch this for me, go grab that for me, go watch this person and follow them to this location and then take this from them, bring it back to me. Something that is actually deep and engaging and can further tell the story of the world. I don't think I need to explain this one too much because it's pretty clear that most of the side quests in Assassin's Creed over the last few years have been pretty thin on narrative depth, and so really anything would be an improvement. Number 7 is that the community is tired of all of this co-op intermingling with the narrative and the single-player campaign. If you're playing a single-player campaign of any game, regardless of genre, you expect the narrative to be fleshed out and to stand on its own merit. But when you integrate co-op, you end up with a ton of issues because all of these resources are being put not only into the co-op, but into making sure that the narrative and all of the missions can make sense while playing it with another person. And it's frankly not worth the investment that they put into it in Unity. Not many people played it, and if you did play it, it was glitchy as all hell. Same with the multiplayer in Assassin's Creed 3. Let's just get rid of it, focus on the single-player story, and if that goes well, maybe you can do a patch and have some sort of multiplayer DLC, something or other, but as of right now, I think it's best left to history. Number 8 is to redesign the, what I call an arcadey heads-up display. Now, if you follow my channel, then you know I am a bit of a stickler when it comes to HUDs. I really think that they have to be minimal, especially in open-world games that are trying to tell a story in the world, environmental storytelling specifically. For instance, there is no reason that Assassin's Creed Syndicate or Unity should have a mini-map on by default. There's no need for it. When you open your map and select a waypoint, it appears in the world and it shines through buildings and you can see it no matter where you are or what you're looking at. And so there's no reason for a mini-map. It's a waste of space and it's covering up something that an artist spent hours and hours or days and days or weeks and weeks working on. So it's best just left out of the picture entirely. Now, luckily, there is a way to turn some of these options off, but others cannot be turned off without the help of a little tweaking that may or may not be officially supported by Ubisoft. One such thing is the highlighting that goes on with opponents. As you've seen in all the gameplay I've used so far, I turned off most of the HUD in Assassin's Creed Syndicate to play through it because it simply wasn't needed. And so what it meant was that as I went through combat sequences, for instance, I had to watch my opponents, and if they started to raise their fists like they were going to attack me, that's when I would hit the parry button, and it made the combat much faster and much more interesting. The problem is that this also means that you can't see when somebody's about to shoot you from 30 feet away out of view of the camera, so you have to just try to bounce around a ton and hope that nobody has a gun. A quick solution to this would be to have a quick setting that you can switch on or off or from one setting to the other. Think Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. That game had a classic heads-up display and a pro heads-up display, and you could turn them on or off based on what you wanted, but the HUD was approached with pro players that were experienced with the game, maybe going through a second playthrough in mind, and also the beginner in mind, and they could switch it off depending on what they were looking for. I would like that in the next Assassin's Creed as well. Number 9, I'm sure many of you have been waiting for this, but simply polish. Polish is going to be the thing that makes or breaks this upcoming Assassin's Creed game. Even though Syndicate, on the whole, was a fairly polished game, at least in terms of major graphical glitches in comparison to Unity, Unity is still ingrained in people's memories as the standard bearer for Assassin's Creed because it was so memorable. All of those glitches where the skin wouldn't render, so it was just floating hair and eyeballs. It was horrifying and really funny at the same time, and that's what they have to shake. They have to release a game that is so polished that even people who are looking for glitches, which I guarantee you there will be, can't find any. And if they can achieve that, if they can put out a game or a product that is so polished and so well designed that even people looking for issues can't find them, they'll be successful. And lastly, I want to just say this. Assassin's Creed is developed by many different studios that work with Ubisoft. It's developed by Ubisoft Montreal specifically and as sort of its headquartered base, but it also has work done by studios in Germany and Singapore, all over the world. Very talented artists are working on these games, but they are so often stifled and suffocated by the corporate management that says we need the game put out at this time, ignore that, ignore this, we just have to get it out. If you don't do this, you won't get your bonus, blah, blah, blah. Typical stuff in big business. But when you're working in the arts, that can stifle the creativity and the passion that comes through in those little moments like the Jabberwocky scene. That's something they didn't need to include in the game, but they chose to because they wanted to help immerse players or give them something to look at while they were walking by if they chose to stop for a second. And that's what these games need more of. They need to let the artists create art, not suffocate them with insane corporate policies made by people who have never touched AutoCAD or any of these systems. It's just something you have to let the artists do what they do best. Let them create. Now, these are just 10 things that me and my community over on Discord were able to throw together and see that they need to be addressed. And if they aren't, then Ubisoft's going to be in some trouble with this next release. But if all of these things are fixed, if all of these things have been approached over the course of the last few years that this upcoming game has been in development, then we're in for a real treat. Hey, did you like that? Well, that was just an extra of the full show that I do every single weekend. So if you haven't seen it yet, then you got to make sure to check it out. Links popping up everywhere in the description box as well. And subscribe if you haven't already to become a member of the Bowel Movement.